Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with a splendid disc, one of those sleeper sort of things that you probably don't have or didn't know existed, and you really ought to listen to it. It's just good music, enjoyable music by a composer who is generally known as a one-shot wonder. And that composer is Max Bruch. You know, him of the violin concerto. The only piece, well, it's not true, because people listen to the first violin concerto, he wrote 3 of them, and the Scottish Fantasy, and Kol Nidre, the cello piece. And so, there are a few things in there. He wrote 3 rather uninteresting symphonies. They're just not very, very good. They're conservative German middle 19th century symphonies. That's what they are in the generic sense. He was a very conservative composer. Terribly conservative composer. In fact, he died in 1920. His years were 1838 to 1920. And as Tovey said, when he died, everybody was surprised to find out he had still been alive. That's how out of date he was by then. But that doesn't mean he didn't have a few good things in him. In fact, he was best known in his lifetime as a composer of choral music, believe it or not. But that stuff is so out of date. I mean, if there's anything duller than your run-of-the-mill 19th century English oratorio, it is your run-of-the-mill 19th century German oratorio. And in fact, they are so run-of-the-mill and out of fashion that Germans don't even acknowledge that they exist. I mean, the English, because they're the oratorio country, they have to haul out one of these things every so often and try to pretend that it's decent music. The Germans have so much great music. I mean, and especially in the latter half of the 19th century, goodness, you've got Brahms and Bruckner and Wagner and Liszt, and you've got everybody, all these terrific people. Why would you haul out some third-rate oratorio by Max Bruch? For example, Odysseus, or, the Song of the Bell. I mean, these things are just interminable. And, I remember I went to see the American Symphony Orchestra. They did Odysseus with Leon Botstein conducting. And, Botstein is an on-again, off-again conductor, but it wouldn't have made any difference how on or off he was when the music itself is off. It was such a snooze. We all walked out. We couldn't stand it after part 1. It consisted entirely of inhibitions. You've got one of those fabulous texts. I mean, it's Odysseus. I mean, it's Odysseus. It's Homer. It's the Odyssey. It's the opportunity of a lifetime to pull out all the stops and go nuts. And it's just, oh my God. You get to the scene with the sirens and you get a bunch of women and they're up there going, "Ooh, Odysseus, what's new?" And the harp goes plink, plink, plink. And that's Bruch's idea of sexual daring. It was just terrible. But with that said, Bruch did write some really fine music, aside from the violin concerto and the Scottish Fantasy. And he did write some really, really beautiful chamber music. I mean, really exquisitely beautiful chamber music, late chamber music too. And for strings and for strings with winds, he was a very, very good chamber music composer in that conservative German style. But I really, really think I'm going to have to do a talk about some of his chamber works because they really are extremely beautiful and well worth hearing. And another disc worth hearing, which probably some of you have seen in passing, or most of you probably have not, is this disc on CPO, containing his complete Swedish dances and Russian dances, which is not really what they are, but that's another issue. And it generally is music based on ethnic folk music. Now, one of the most fascinating things about German composers when they do this sort of thing is that German music was, for so many years, so firmly rooted in its own musical tradition that there was no German folk tradition to draw from. Of course, there was. I mean, Brahms wrote, Deutsche Volkslieder. But when German composers wanted to do something like the Liszt Hungarian Rhapsodies or the Brahms Hungarian dances or the Dvorak Slavonic dances, they had to look abroad. There wasn't anything in Germany. You don't see any major German composers from the 19th century doing German dances. I mean, there used to be German dances. I mean, Mozart, Haydn, and Beethoven, they wrote tons of German dances. There was a Deutsche Tanz. It was they wrote instrumental movements using those things. But that tradition had become so subsumed into the larger orchestral and instrumental music tradition that the folk part, the charm part, the part people want, the exotic bits, it no longer existed in German music for all intents and purposes. And so you had to go elsewhere. And so Bruch looked at Sweden and Russia. And we have here on this lovely disc, which is the SWR, Rundfunk Orchestra Kaiserslautern. Remember them? Those guys? It's them with Werner Andreas Albert. And they are doing the 2 suites of Swedish dances. There are 15 dances in all, which he divided into 2 orchestral suites. And the Serenade after Swedish Melodies for string orchestra in C minor, that's Opus Posthumus. And then, most fun of all, in my way of thinking, is the suite on Russian folk melodies for large orchestra, Opus 79B. And the B is what means it's for a large orchestra. And we're going to play some samples. And we're going to have a very good time. And I just want to introduce you to this lovely disc of light music, charmingly done, beautifully crafted. I mean, Bruch was a craftsman. He was a craftsman. He had a very choleric temper, and he apparently hated everything that wasn't conservative and Germanic. But within his style, he knew what he was doing. And so let's listen. Let's listen to let's start with a Swedish dance. It's number 9, marked Vivace, from the second suite. It's a minute long. It's just a delightful little dance. So here's one of these Swedish dances, one of the quick, zippy ones. It's absolutely charming. It sounds kind of like a Brahms Hungarian dance, only Swedish. Hear the difference? There you go. And then let's try another one. I just want to play you some samples and then turn you loose. There's a beautiful Adagio con espressione in the first suite. This is dance number 6, and it is exquisitely beautiful. Just lovely. Here it is, Adagio con espressione from the Swedish Dance's first suite. Now, the Swedish dances have been recorded before. Some of you may be familiar with them because Kurt Mazur did them. Remember his recording of the Bruch symphonies, and they needed couplings, and the couplings were the Swedish dances. There have been a couple versions of them, so they're not completely unknown. In fact, I was thinking of doing one of these pieces as one of those mystery melody things to see how you would do with them. But then I said, nah. I mean, first of all, you guys know it all anyway. And second of all, I noticed something. Someone mentioned to me that you could get the names of any of these pieces if you just do a hey Siri, what am I listening to? And so I played with that a little bit, and sure enough, there is nothing so obscure that it is not on Siri, and she identifies she, whatever it is, the voice identifies not, the exact performance that you're listening to. It's really quite a program. It's learning all the time, and more music is being added to it. So it's very, very hard to put anything over on anybody if you want to cheat a little. And I'm not saying that any of you did, but some of you did, because Siri does not always give complete information. Usually you get the name of the artist and then the work, but you don't get the composer, because as usual with these popular things based on the pop music way of doing things, they have not figured out how to identify classical pieces. It's composer, work, performers, right? No, Siri doesn't usually do it that way. And I saw some guesses in some of the comments on these things in Siri format. So I gather that a few people cheated a little, which I think is really very funny. But it doesn't matter. The point is, I wanted to do one of these Russian things, one of the movements from the suite after Russian folk melodies as one of the mystery melodies, because you know the tune. And then the question would have been, who is the composer? It's the finale of the suite after Russian folk melodies. The tune is the famous Song of the Volga Boatman, which you know from Glazanov's Stenka Razin, and Stravinsky did an arrangement. Everyone knows it. It's on all of those cartoons, those Warner Brother cartoons. The Roadrunner and Coyote cartoons, where you see the skeletons in the desert, and it's out in the West. Who knew it was Russian, right? Da 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 dum, da 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 dum. You know the tune, right? So that is the tune that Bruch uses, only he speeds it up considerably from its usual Russian arrangements. But it's really quite a hoot to hear the version of it that he uses as the finale of his Russian suite. So here then is Bruch's version of the Song of the Volga Boatman, and it's just you're going to want to get this disc once you hear this. I suspect it'll really charm you. And, we can all use a little charm now and then, right? Here you go. Yes, that is Max Bruch, the composer that, well, what can we say? He was a true second-rater, but most second-raters had in them a few really, really good pieces of music, sometimes even great pieces of music. And Bruch was one of those. He was too good a craftsman not to let inspiration occasionally take wing and result in something really, really worth hearing. And this delightful disc, if you like the Slavonic dances or the Hungarian dances or Malcolm Arnold's English dances or anybody's dances, the symphonic dances from West Side Story, you're going to want to add this to your classical dance collection. Once again, it's a CPO recording featuring the SWR Radio Symphony Orchestra Kaiserslautern under Werner Andreas Albert, Max Bruch, Swedish dances, both suites, the Serenade after Swedish folk melodies, and the suite on Russian folk melodies. What a terrific little collection this is. And it's available as of time of video. I can't say what's going to happen, but I know this exists because I just got an extra copy to give someone as a gift. I mean, it's that kind of a disc. It makes a lovely gift. If someone doesn't know Max Bruch, and they like this period, nice, beautiful, romantic, Germanic, folk-inflected, romantic, nationalist music stuff that they don't have or aren't likely to have, this is a really good option. So keep on listening, folks. Thank you for joining me. Enjoy your Bruch while you can. Take care.